Good morning, and there you are, and welcome to Backchannel. It's 9 o'clock here on the West Coast, and it's kind of 9, 10, 12 o'clock on the East Coast, Eastern. I'm Anthony Davis. This is the Anthony Davis Show, as it says right there. We've got lots to talk about today. We're going to kind of whiz our way through the news stories, find out what's happening anywhere and everywhere. Sarah's producing this show from, I don't even know where you are. Maybe you can pop in and we can talk about it, and kind of get to know each other a little bit because it's our first time. Where am I? Where are you? Where am I?
Oh, sorry about that.
No, it's fine. I mean, I don't even deserve to be full screen, let's be honest.
Here, let me fix that for us. Here, we'll do
fine.
this.
You look like you're sitting on the floor with your laptop on your knees.
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to do a little studio thing. I'm in Brooklyn right now.
Oh, you're in Brooklyn. That's so exciting.
Yeah. It's an exciting
like the movies.
time. Yeah. All right, I'll let them look at you instead of me.
No, I don't know that that's necessarily a good idea. I think it's much better the other way around. Sarah, we like to play a little music throughout this show, so if you're able to do that from the kind of the chill vibes section and just run it throughout the whole program, it just gives it a little bit of pop. Just to have a little bit of pop throughout the program without stopping. That's kind of the thing we do. So Sarah's in Brooklyn. I'm in Los Angeles, California. This is Backchannel on this Wednesday morning. It's the 23rd of March. If you want to get in touch, then you can easily do that. You just jump into backchannel.tv. It's like a little chat facility on your browser, backchannel.tv. You can do that there. You can also go to our YouTube channel and follow the show, but also comment as you see fit. I'll see that as well. But most importantly, if you have an Echo Show device, then you can very cleverly just talk to your device. Just wake it up, say the word say, and then your message. That comes through here as well. So very easy to do. Lots of ways to get in touch. Lots of people already getting in touch. Thank you very much for that. And, stick around, stay with us, join us. Jump on the chat, do whatever makes you feel most comfortable. I'm not one of those people that insists. If you want to chat, then chat. If you don't want to chat, then don't chat. But if you want to watch, then watch. Definitely watch. And you can leave a review at backchannel.tv as well. A review of what? I don't know, because we haven't really done anything yet. But it's kind of nice to know that you're there. So let's jump straight in on some of the subjects we're going to be talking about today. We've obviously got climate change to look at, because that's the most important thing. I sometimes worry that we end up having these conversations about, smaller issues that definitely need attention. Of course they do. But it's like, unless you deal with climate change, none of this is going to matter, because we're literally not going to be here. It has to be the number one priority. Also, we're going to look at the elections. Will Republicans ever want free and fair elections? And why are they afraid of people voting is the question. And also the pandemic strategy. Can the US unite behind one? Of course, a lot of people are over it, which is very sad. And finally, fixing the college admissions process. Those are some of the things we're going to look at today. Some of the morning newspapers to jump on first. Let's see what's happening kind of in and around the world. The Anniston Star this morning leads with Ukraine braces for more destruction. And a very sad photo of a mother with her child on the front page as Biden warns of Russian chemical attack. Yes, it says Ukrainian forces defending the capital, Kiev, managed to wrest back control of a strategic outlying town that Russian troops had earlier captured. Ukrainian officials said on Tuesday, but invading troops were reported to have breached the besieged port city of Mariupol, scene of some of the war's most harrowing attacks on civilians. Russia's massive but seemingly foundering invasion of its western neighbor lurched towards the beginning of a second month. Western officials redoubled warnings that an increasing frustrated President Vladimir Putin might resort to use of chemical weapons or other unconventional weapons, a concern expected to dominate a NATO summit on Thursday, with President Joe Biden in attendance. So that's tomorrow that that's going to happen. Well, in Russia, where Putin has recently imposed some of the most repressive measures of his more than 2 decades in power, the country's premier opposition figure, Alexei Navalny, was sentenced to 9 more years in prison on charges of fraud and contempt of court. Navalny responded by calling online for his compatriots to topple Putin, whom he described as a toad sitting on an oil pipe. There it is. I mean, that really is the tragedy of this whole scenario, isn't it? That, Putin, cozied up to by Trump, of course, adored by various dictators, and yet imprisons the only opposition voice. And if you think that that's okay, well, then you need to have a serious think about yourself and think about who you are and what you're doing and all of that. Ari's joined us. Hello, Ari. Welcome. Stacey's here. She says, are you ready for your lunch hour? Yes, I am. Thank you. Are you ready for your lunch hour? Because it's not my lunch hour. In fact, this is quite the opposite of my lunch. My lunch hour does not look like this. And my lunch normally is about 2.5 hours, just so we're clear. Okay, back to the newspaper. That's the Anniston Star. Also, State Schools Chief grapples with teacher shortage. And Main Street, Oxford, hosts a walk for ideas. Isn't that lovely? So that's how the Anniston Star is looking this morning. What else do we have here? Let's jump on another newspaper. See where we're at. Hang on a second. Oh, yes, the New Haven Register. Rent aid runs low, evictions run high. Yes, this is as funding for the state's rental assistance program dwindles. The number of eviction filings in Connecticut is on track to hit its highest level since at least 2017. As of March 16, there were 1,275 evictions in March, the highest number in a month since the first COVID-19 case hit Connecticut. I mean, think about that for a second. 1,275 evictions, 1,275 people in that area suddenly homeless because they lost jobs due to coronavirus or they don't have enough money to pay their rent. It says if filings continue at that rate per day, there'll be just over 2,400 by the end of the month, the highest of any month since at least 2017. Well, the centre's data on filings goes back to January 2017. As of Monday, the $400.6 million in federal money that Connecticut had for rental assistance had either been given out or was labelled as payments in progress on the United CT dashboard. We know many are about to jump off the cliff. We're about to see a lot of people in need, said Carla Mikos, the executive director of Operation for Hope of Fairfield. I mean, it really is these non-profits that are the only ones really kind of drawing anyone's attention to this. Because it seems that, Republican senators and congressmen, they don't care. They're just not interested. Just not interested. They're refusing to fund more COVID financial support for people. They just think that people should be able to make it by themselves. Don't understand the consequences. And also there's been a lot of talk of long COVID becoming a thing now, Well, here, actually, I'll rephrase that. There's not been enough talk about how long COVID is going to affect people. And there was a report out of Oxford University today in England where they said that long COVID is going to turn regular people, able-bodied people, into disabled people. People will literally be living on disability because of long COVID. And again, that's a thing that has not been really discussed or kind of brought into the public forum in any great way. A story about a library opening in Dixwell, the Q House building. SCSU prof writes on Mexican food's connection to culture. And finally, schools probe complaints of mistreatment. This is also a story on the New Haven Register. Families of some special education students from Guildford Public Schools have submitted complaints to the town's Human Rights Commission, alleging staff bullies parents and changes individualized education programs without parental knowledge. The resolution is very low on this, so my eyesight is not great because I'm like I'm an old, blind, bald man. The Acadiana Advocate. They lead this morning with LA to get $1.7 billion for hurricane relief. This is Louisiana, of course, not Los Angeles. Is getting an unexpected windfall for the it's $1.7 billion in federal hurricane relief dollars. Officials said on Tuesday a major infusion of funds that will help boost long-term recovery prospects in hard-hit sections of the state. Governor John Bell Edwards and U.S. Senator Bill Cassidy announced the new funding, noting that $450 million will go to Louisiana's southwest region. to cover unmet needs stemming from hurricanes Laura and Delta, which struck in 2020. The new money represents a major increase over the $600 million already approved. So there it is. Sarah, did you manage to find any of the tunes that we normally have on this show that just kind of play in the background? Did you manage to find the tunes, the music section, and that you could play in it? It's just, I don't know why, I don't like talking to silence. It makes me feel like I'm kind of alone, and I really struggle both professionally and personally with being alone for very long at all. You know what I mean? Yeah. Working on it. Okay. I don't know how it works. There's a thing on Restream called music, and you just apparently choose like the chilled vibes one and press play. I think that's what they do. I don't really know. I've never seen it. Okay, let me move on. Oh, Stacey says, Anthony, you're not alone. You've got us. No, I agree with you. I totally do have you, Stacey. I get that, and I'm very grateful for you. The loneliness, I think, comes from within. You know, and some people like to medicate with music, and I do. You know, just it's even when I'm at home. Are you like that? Like, I don't like silence when I'm at home. I like to have some tunes on in the background. You know, a little James Taylor maybe, or something just kind of vibey and just a little hippie. You know, it makes for it just makes for a nicer environment. I believe some people don't like music. Stacey says, I don't see why you shouldn't have music, because I love music. Well, if you love it and I love it, then, you know, Sarah's just working on it. It's fine. No rush. Okay, let's see what else we have here on the old newspaper front, because it'd be good to kind of get through these just for the right reasons, you know. Here's one. My computer's being pretty slow today as well. Why is that? Okay. It says, this is the Daily Times, Cowboys for Trump founder convicted. A federal judge on Tuesday convicted an elected official from New Mexico of illegally entering restricted U.S. Capitol grounds, but acquitted him of engaging in disorderly conduct during the riot that disrupted Congress from certifying Joe Biden's presidential election victory. A U.S. District Judge Trevor McFadden heard one day of testimony without a jury on Monday before handing down a verdict on the misdemeanor case against Otero County Commissioner Coy Griffin, a 48-year-old former rodeo rider who helped fund a group called Cowboys for Trump. I mean, Trump doesn't care about cowboys. You know, he doesn't care about anybody apart from himself. So, you know, why would it be a thing? You create Cowboys for Trump, and that you're basically letting Trump off the hook. He doesn't have to do anything. McFadden, a nominee for then-President Donald Trump, said that there was ample evidence that Griffin knew that he was in a restricted area and didn't leave. Griffin crossed over 3 walls, needing help from others or a ladder to get over them, the judge noted. All of this would suggest to a normal person that perhaps you should not be entering the area, McFadden said from the bench. But the judge said prosecutors didn't meet their burden to prove that Griffin engaged in disorderly conduct. Arguably, he was trying to calm people down, not rile them up, he said. Griffin's trial in Washington, D.C. was the second among the hundreds of federal cases arising from the January 6, 2021 siege. Earlier this month, in the first trial, a jury convicted... There it is. You nailed it. And so you can go a little louder if you like, a little bit louder, a little more. That's so good. Thank you. Appreciate that. A little more volume. Don't be shy. You know, think of it as a concert with like a man attached rather than a concert attached to a man. Yeah. Griffin's trial in Washington, D.C. was the second among the hundreds of federal cases arising from the January 6, 2021 siege. Earlier this month, in the first trial, a jury convicted a Texas man, Guy Wesley Reffitt, of storming the Capitol with a holstered handgun, interfering with police and obstructing Congress's joint session to certify the Electoral College vote. I mean, I still can't quite believe that this happened, you know? And I also can't quite believe that people are kind of not really, you know, there are plenty of people that are just like, it doesn't matter. It's like this is the single most important thing that has happened in terms of America's, you know, conflicted history. The insurrection, the trying to overturn a fair election. It's massive, and it's the biggest investigation the Justice Department have ever undertaken. And there's plenty of people that just saw it as a kind of light riot, and it was anything but that. So that's how the Daily Times leads this morning. Let's jump on another one. Oh, Gary's dropped in. Hi, Gary. Stacey says, what's up in the San Antonio Express News? Well, maybe we'll find out. Sarah, maybe you could find the San Antonio Express News for us, and then we could do that for Stacey. Let's have a look at a couple more. Let's see. Let me do this wind farm story. This looks quite interesting. Here we go. This is the Times Record News. Largest wind farm built at once begins work in Oklahoma. Which is very exciting because, wind farms, as contrary to popular belief, are the future. And I personally would rather see wind farms everywhere on this planet and in this country. Everywhere. I'd rather go to the salt flats and see a whole... I mean, they probably wouldn't work so well. They need to be kind of on the coast. But I would rather see wind farms everywhere and solar panels everywhere than know that we were building more power stations, coal-fired or nuclear. I really feel like it would feel, and it should do to you too, hopefully, really kind of quite warming in more ways than one, to see wind farms everywhere. They're not unsightly, they're actually rather beautiful, as long as they keep them white and not rusty, great. It says the largest wind farm built at one time in North America has begun operations, providing energy to Oklahoma customers. The Public Service Company of Oklahoma, PSO, announced on Monday the Traverse facility is a 998-megawatt center in both Blaine and Custer counties, just outside Oklahoma City. It's part of a 1,484-megawatt North Central Energy Facilities project. In addition to the 356-turbine Traverse facility, that's good, isn't it? 356 of them. Although the noise gives you cancer, obviously. The NCEF project includes the 199-megawatt Sundance and Wind Farm near Carmen, Oklahoma, that began commercial operation in 2021 in April, and the 287-megawatt Maverick Wind Farm southwest of Enid, Oklahoma, which began in September 2021. All three facilities have cold weather packages for increased performance during extreme weather. PSO said that if the fuel-free NCEF project had been in operation during the winter storm of February 2021, more than $200 million in savings could have been realized. You see? This is it, we're just wasting time. Gary's dropped in. Hi, Gary. Welcome. And Devout Fox. Oh, wonderful. Jen, nice to see you. Thank you for dropping into Backchannel. It's 9:20 here on the West Coast, 20 after 12 Eastern. How do you feel about wind farms? Because, of course, Donald Trump lied about them and said that they were bad for birds and that they gave you cancer and all this, said that they only worked for a few years. I mean, none of that is true. It just is a lie. And so... I really think that people need to understand the fact that we could power all of America with wind farms if we had enough of them, combined with solar. It is possible. I mean, it would also require us to reduce our usage a little bit because we use an excessive amount of electricity and energy. We just don't even realize. Just leaving your TV on standby is using energy. And there really are some very smart ways of coping with that now and reducing that level of energy. You can get like a smart meter that kind of shows what's being used. There's kind of interesting technical ways of getting around it. And also things can be set on timers, You could even buy, here's the thing, right? For like $10, you can buy one of those clockwork timers that is a plug socket with a socket on it. And you could plug the TV into that, or a whole bunch of things on a four-way, splitter into that, and set the timer to be off overnight. So and even if you go to work in the morning, you're not going to need those things necessarily. So you could set it for like half the day to be off. So a $10 investment for you, probably less even, to buy the clockwork adapter would enable a whole bunch of things to be off and you'd save money. I just think that we don't really in America have the mentality, because we've always been used to like free, not free obviously, but kind of, endless supply of energy. Bentley, hello, good morning, welcome. Anthony, is Tracy joining us for the hour today? Who's Tracy? I don't know. We've got Sarah here. Gary, Devout Fox, Bentley, Crystal, Rooted Condor, and Ari. Welcome. Always welcome. So maybe you could let me know how you feel about the wind farm. I mean, like me, would you be interested in just seeing a wind farm anywhere and everywhere? In every town and every city, there are wind farms? Knowing that energy is being generated and is completely free. The whole process of bringing energy from the wind, or solar panels taking heat from the sun and converting that into electricity. Do you not feel like it would be worth littering the planet with these things in order to know that we weren't making use of fossil fuel? I mean, it just seems like a no-brainer to me, In fact, there's a lovely photo on the front of the Record Times with the headline, "Largest wind farm built at once begins work in Oklahoma." And the sun's coming up behind the wind turbines, and they look beautiful. I mean, then how could they not be beautiful? They're so slim. They're so skinny. They're so neat. And, I was reading up about them the other day, and they were saying, I think I mentioned this on the show already, but, if the original wind farm or wind turbine was that big, in terms of like the first one that was built on this planet that they used as a trial, the current ones, by comparison to that, are this big. Right? The new wind turbines are so large, and it's amazing. They're very impressive. Oh, Aunt Tracy, who's taking care of you. I see. Tracy, hello. Welcome to Backchannel. Nice to see you. Thank you for looking after Stacy. Something going weird with my neck. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's just my neck. Also on the front of the Times Record News this morning, teacher strikes seen across US. This is again COVID related. This is in January. It says Minneapolis public school students stayed home for 2 weeks as the Omicron COVID variant surged and schools shuttered. This month, schools have closed for another 2 weeks and counting because of a teacher strike. With no deal reached over the weekend, classes remain cancelled on Monday. Minneapolis teachers have been picketing for better pay and benefits, smaller classes, and more student mental health services. From Illinois to California, teachers' unions are actively on strike or preparing to have members walk out of the job over many of the same demands. Yeah, I mean, this is going to happen more and more over the next couple of years. Tornado damage extensive in Jacksboro and Bowie. Thunderstorms that brought beneficial rain to Wichita Falls turned violent just east of here, dropping tornadoes in Jacksboro, Bowie, and deep into hill country on Monday. There you are. And Morrow's here from California. Hello, Morrow. Welcome to Backchannel. Nice to see you. If you want to message me, go to backchannel.tv on your browser, or if you've got an Echo Show with a window, with a screen, wake it up, say, and then your message. There it is. Okay, let me just whiz through some of these newspapers, just, for squits and giggles. Finally, let's see what this one is. This particular site that I use, it's pretty slow. Here we go. In Europe, it's Biden versus Putin as the war rages. This is on the front of Politico this morning. It says President Joe Biden heads to Europe this week as the leader of a coalition of Western governments trying to stave off the worst military crisis in Europe since World War II. His mission to keep it all from falling apart. Yes, the alliance has largely marched in lockstep to confront Moscow, a remarkable demonstration of collective resolve not seen for many decades. But its bonds could soon be faced with deep strains, chief among them a creeping sense of powerlessness among the allies and reluctant admissions that the war may only end when Vladimir Putin decides it does. The nations of the free world are more united and more deterred than any more purpose than at any point in recent memory, said White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan on Tuesday on the eve of Biden's trip. He made it clear that the path ahead would not be easy. Well, I'll tell you something. Mariupol is pretty much devastated. I mean, many of these cities now, they've been completely flattened by the Russian military. I don't understand what's Putin going to have left for himself, once he's completely annihilated this country. And let's say he wins and he takes control and installs a puppet government into Kiev. What's he got? He's basically got a devastated country with full of refugees with nowhere to live. I mean, how is that winning? Exactly. The nations of the free world are more united and more deterred. I already read that one. Hang on. This says there will be hard days ahead in Ukraine, the hardest for the Ukrainian troops on the front lines and the civilians under Russian bombardment, Sullivan added. This war will not end easily or rapidly. The pressures Biden faces at home are mirrored among his European counterparts. While their domestic situations differ, all of them are trying to balance the moral imperative to act on behalf of Ukraine, the fears of further escalating conflict, and the economic costs of implementing an aggressive sanctions regime against Russia. The trickiness of Biden's job, however, is felt more acutely given the expectations much of the world is now placing on his shoulders. I mean, I actually think Biden's doing pretty well, because what he's doing is he's keeping the international community on the same page. And you might not realize that, but, the international community is speaking with one voice, and that's courtesy of America. And that's really kind of what we need, We really need to know that America is in control of the Allied response. Because we're talking about, Russia and America being the dominant nuclear powers, and you really don't want to kind of get into a questionable situation. I read that one analyst said that Putin would only use nuclear weapons if there was a threat to Russia. So if Russia came under attack, or if Russia was suddenly there was a chance of it losing its sovereignty. He didn't care about Ukraine losing its sovereignty, but Russia, that would be the time that, the nukes would come out of the box. A photograph of Ted Cruz, unfortunately. He's really quite a disgusting man, in more ways than one. Doesn't know how to wear a beard, firstly. But secondly, he was holding a copy of the book Critical Race Theory up, speaking behind a poster of a quote from Ketanji Brown Jackson during the second day of her Supreme Court confirmation hearings. I mean, the gaslighting from Cruz and a lot of these Republican lawmakers has been so rife in the last 48 hours, the 2 days that they've been grilling Ketanji Brown Jackson, the nominee, Biden's nominee for the Supreme Court. I mean, it doesn't help that these people are racists, Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, Tom Cotton, Marsha Blackburn, all grilling Ketanji Brown Jackson. The headline here on the front of Politico: GOP's 2024 contenders leap into court spotlight. A quartet of Republican presidential hopefuls aren't afraid to use their judicial committee lecterns to audition for presidential runs. Senator Tom Tillis guessed that 2 of them will run for president. He serves on the Judiciary Committee with the 4, and he said, in a Senate where committee meetings often go unattended and unnoticed, a Supreme Court hearing is still one of politicians' biggest platforms. And if the quartet of potential 2024 hopefuls know it, with all of them sitting together on a national stage more than a year before the presidential primaries, so they reckon that Cruz and Hawley and Cotton and Blackburn are all potential presidential nominees for the Republican Party. Which is crazy, because Josh Hawley is a far-right extremist. He's just crazy. I mean, he's got this very mature voice, and he looks and sounds like he should be educated and smart and self-aware and moderate and understanding, just like getting it. And he's not. He's a very, very extreme right-wing person. And for that reason, I fear that he's probably the most dangerous, because he's kind of new on the scene, and he's one of these people don't quite know what they're getting with him. He was the one famously who put his fist in the air on January 6th when he was walking by in his suit, and that photograph was used many, many times to kind of show his support of the insurrection. Ted Cruz, as we know, the guy who can't wear a beard. I mean, the beard is literally trying to climb off that man's face. He's just a serial gaslighter, He's never really done anything other than just cause trouble. And he's constantly caught in his own lies. So that's unfortunate. He's also another one who was behind the January 6th insurrection and now denies it. I don't know so much about Tom Cotton and Marsha Blackburn, but I think Cruz and Hawley are definitely likely to be two of the candidates for the 2024 presidential run. Or certainly, they'll push for the nomination. And Democrats start questioning Biden administration's Iran nuclear talks. This is bipartisan skepticism of President Joe Biden's efforts to revive the Iran nuclear deal is emerging on Capitol Hill as his administration races to put the finishing touches on a pact that was left in tatters by Donald Trump. While Republicans have been airing their concerns more loudly, some top Democrats are beginning to openly express reservations about public reports outlining the details of the new agreement, which would include lifting some sanctions on Tehran. Their doubts follow warnings from administration officials in a closed-door briefing on Tuesday that Iran is closer than ever to producing and enriching uranium for the purposes of creating a nuclear weapon. Carl has joined us from North Carolina. Hi, Carl. He says, hi. Hi. Great to see you. Thank you for dropping in, and stay with us. You can message me at any time in the same way that you said hi. Just wake up your device, say the word say, and then your message. It only works on the Echo Show. Otherwise, go to backchannel.tv. Murrow is with us as well. Crystal and Bentley and Tracy, of course, who's with Stacy, Devout Fox and Gary, Rooted Condor and Ari. So nice to know that you're part of the show this morning. We're just looking through some of the front pages. And Sarah's with us as well. Sarah, do you want to pop back in and we can say hi? There's the San Antonio Express News. Thank you very much for that. It's very nice of you. Pop in and we'll do some more chit-chats. Worries grow of war intensifying is on the front of the San Antonio Express News. This is for Stacy. As Ukrainian forces fought off continuing Russian efforts to occupy Mariupol. Also, Central Texas ripped apart by 5 likely tornadoes. Areas of SA North, Hays County among those hit. Yeah, that's Guadalupe County. And finally, Jackson targeted on race theory. Again, why is it that white men, racist white men, think that they can accuse a black woman who is far more qualified than they are of being racist? How does that work exactly? It said Ted Cruz on Tuesday grilled Ketanji Brown Jackson about her views on critical race theory, reading passages and showing pages from books including An Anti-Racist Baby that are taught at a Washington private school where she's a board member. Cruz used much of his time questioning Jackson on the second day of her confirmation hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee by focusing on the curriculum at the school, the Georgetown Day School, which he said is filled and overflowing with critical race theory. They include a book called Anti-Racist Baby, the Texas Republican said, flipping through a copy of the picture book as his staff displayed chart-sized copies behind him. There are portions of this book that I find really quite remarkable. One portion of the book says babies are taught to be racist or anti-racist. There's no neutrality. Do you agree with this book that's being taught to kids, that babies are racist? Cruz said. Senator Jackson said to Cruz, pausing for 8 seconds before continuing her response, I do not believe that any child should be made to feel as though they are racist, although they are not valued, although they are less than, that they are victims, that they are oppressors. I don't believe in any of that. Jackson said the Georgetown Day School was founded in 1945 during a time of legal segregation by a group of white Jewish parents and black parents who wanted their children to be able to attend school together. The ideals of equality and justice are at the core of the school's mission, she said. This is the problem. This is Ted Cruz taking this stuff out of context and just talking garbage, like gaslighting her, making her look like... it's so embarrassing. Sarah, hi. Did you watch any of the hearings yesterday?
Yeah, we were talking about it on Get On Up as well, that there's just, the way when Brett Kavanaugh was being grilled by the Senate and he threw a tantrum over drinking a beer, and Ketanji Brown is just so composed, and there's such a double standard how she's treated as a black woman when she is so qualified. The worry is that this won't really change the makeup of the court. It's still a very, very partisan body of government, which it really shouldn't be. But yeah, Ted Cruz is just a terrible person. I agree with what you said. I don't think his beard wants to be on his face. I don't think his Yeah, it's just awful. And like, you see these men who are not as educated as she is. They're not as good as she is, and she has to like take it. She has to sit there and take it. And I mean, she's amazing. I can't wait till she's on the court and to see what she does. And I'm so glad that like young Black kids are going to see this and be inspired and be able to see themselves. So that's at least some good news.
Yeah, young Black kids are going to have to watch old white men being racist towards a Black woman and see that as a role model. I mean, it's just racism. I mean, that's what it is.
It is.
You know,
it's
it's you
racism.
call it systemic or call it, outward or whatever. Turn the music down a little bit because you're not as loud as me. And it means that you can't be heard quite as much. Thank you. But I really feel like this is like showing America as it is today. This is like if you had to kind of showcase a modern America, take yesterday's hearings as the example, right?
Yeah.
Just take and that is modern America, right? The GOP is finished as a party. It's like it's a disaster.
Yeah.
And so, and Jeff Teetridge tweeted, and I retweeted it because it was very interesting. He just wrote these words: "Racists explaining racism to a Black woman is peak America."
It really is.
That's basically
it really
what he
is.
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
100%.
So that's kind of where we're at. And then AOC said something interesting yesterday as well. This is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She said that can journalists please not pretend it's normal for a U.S. senator to declare that the Supreme Court was wrong to legalize interracial marriage. This is after, I don't know if you saw this, Senator Mike Braun suggesting
I did see that
if you're not wanting the Supreme Court to weigh in on issues like interracial marriage, then you're not going to be able to have your cake and eat it too. And he said that interracial marriage should be argued at a state level. I mean, we're not... It's like, who are these people?
Well, it's so interesting that they like bring up stuff like this because the Republican Party always says, my rights, my freedom, like my this, and like you can't take away this, but yet they're so about taking away people's freedom like that. Like they're like, don't involve the government. I don't want this, but yet that's involving the government in your life, and also ridiculous because you should be able to marry whoever you want, and that's just so archaic and very like 1800s, and somebody like that should not be in the Senate or not be allowed to be in any government. But yeah.
And this is why it's racist, because, anybody should be allowed to marry anybody as long as they're white, is what he's saying, right? That's what he's saying. And that's really what all of this is about, All of this critical race theory garbage, which is not taught in schools. Critical race theory is a university module that's done in a couple of places, that is a kind of bolt-on module for people that are studying the socioeconomic effects of race. It's a massive subject for them, but it's not widely discussed. What they're actually saying by taking this CRT phrase, and they love to put names on it, like Antifa, they create a whole body, they create an organization or an existence of a something that's not even a thing. Antifa doesn't exist, but they've created it using a kind of Muslim-sounding word that makes their kind of white supporters feel, like they're onto something, when of course they're not. But it's the same with critical race theory. It's like it doesn't exist. It's not taught in schools. What they're actually getting at is that they want there to be no mention of any race other than this white Aryan race.
Exactly.
And that is fundamentally why all of these announcements are racist. And so I'm not saying Ted Cruz is being racist to Ketanji Brown Jackson.
But he is
just racist.
Yeah,
and
he's just racist.
And that's the problem. If he wasn't racist, he wouldn't be holding up a book that has nothing to do with anything and trying to claim that it is the gospel.
Exactly.
The other thing is the hypocrisy of these people as well, especially like the anti-gay sentiment or the anti-trans sentiment. A lot of these white people campaigning are probably secretly gay themselves, like struggling with their own identity. And so the way that they choose to deal with it is to kind of go down this evangelical route rather than accepting and facing and being open about who they are.
Exactly. And like, why do they care so much? Like, it doesn't affect you. And like, especially with these anti-trans laws, it's just so ridiculous. Like, trans folks have always been using whatever bathroom they've wanted. They've always been playing whatever sport they wanted. You're just now realizing that, and you want to police people's bodies. So
and invariably, it's white men trying to police black women's bodies. Because that's really the issue here, isn't it? The people that have less access to abortion are invariably black or brown women. This is socioeconomically proven. And so it becomes doubly annoying, doubly frustrating, doubly racist, because, of course, the white women that seek abortion can afford an abortion. And this is why it's such a tragedy. This is why I was so pleased to live in California and have Governor Gavin Newsom say that anybody in Florida or Texas that wanted an abortion, he would happily pay for them to come to California.
Oh, yeah.
Travel here, put them up, allow them to have their procedure and then go home safely.
Oh, yeah. I mean, New York is pretty liberal, too, most days, sometimes. I mean, we're working on it. I feel like our new mayor might not have the same ideals, but it's. I think it's just about our privilege of what we have access to, and a lot of these people in government their lives aren't really based on reality, and they've been elected through rich people, and there's a ton of millionaires in Congress, and that's how they got elected. And they're pushing their views, which aren't popular, by the way. An overwhelming majority of Americans support abortion and access to abortion. That's just a fact. And
they're not representative of the people. So we have a very unrepresented population, and we have a very non-representative government. And so you're right. America is actually quite a progressive country. And
absolutely.
If you were to survey it nationally, it's a place where people don't want the death penalty, and they do want women's rights, access to women's right to choose. But you see, what the right have cleverly done is because they're so good at marketing and branding, to brand anti-abortion as pro-life is a genius marketing movement. I mean, it's amazing, because you're saying the alternative is that you're pro-death, which of course nobody is. And so that's the thing that's so frustrating, and that's why I wish Democrats would be a little better at kind of how they market stuff. But the difference is that, democracy is very nuanced. It's very difficult to kind of brand a general feeling of goodness and positivity towards everybody without sounding like a hippie.
Oh, absolutely. But, James was telling me he was at this Indigenous Peoples Conference, and they were saying, a lot, again, the Republicans are a lot about my rights, but a lot of Indigenous folks will think about, what are my responsibilities? Like, what can I do for my community and my world to help? And I feel like that's something that we as Americans or people living in the United States could really adapt. Or like, what are my responsibilities to everyone around me in my community to help make the world better? And I feel like if we all thought that, we wouldn't be having a lot of these discussions, because people would be thinking about someone other than themselves, and wouldn't just be thinking about how something would affect them. They would be thinking about how it affects everybody. So I think about that a lot.
Yeah, I do too. It's a bit like Joe Manchin in West Virginia, He's a bad person. He really is. And he's also not very clever. He doesn't have much of an intellect. But what he does have is family connections to oil and gas, and a lot of coal miners living in his state. It's the poorest state, or the second poorest state in the country. And,
yes, absolutely.
And yet he does nothing for his people. And, he's the one who is going to he and
And cinema.
Kirsten Sinema, yeah, they basically have halted an entire political movement for a new generation,
absolutely.
just because they've been bought. They're bought and paid for, these people. But Manchin is a bad person. He really is. And it's so sad that two people can basically derail an entire political generation. I feel very sad about that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And, it feels like the Democrats are a little weak and can't really stand up to them. And while I hate Republicans and I hate the GOP and I think they're Nazis, but, at least they're tough. At least they can market well and they're united in their hate and awfulness. Democrats just are very, very divided in how they want to approach things.
But it's nuance rather than division, I think that's the reality, because we don't all think the same. But and part of me wishes that Manchin and Sinema would just go and be Republicans, and then it would be clearer. But tragically, we're so desperate on this other side to say I don't get to vote in this country, so I don't really have a choice. But I mean, the Democrats are so desperate for the votes on other things that they need Manchin and Sinema, and Manchin has voted, for some good stuff, and his vote is useful. But the reality is that he has his own interests at heart more than the interests of the American people or the people of West Virginia, and that's the great tragedy, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'll let you get back to your show. I'll let them look at you instead of me.
You get back to your pancakes.
I wish. Oh,
your
my
short
goodness.
stack. I can see it down there. Okay. So that's Sarah. She's in Brooklyn. She's producing the show remotely. That's how it works, you see. We're very remote. I am emotionally remote, but physically very present. Let's see what is happening here. Cindy's dropped in from South Carolina. Ryan's here as well. Versed Duck, thank you. Thank you very much to you for joining in. Me is with us as well. Carl's here. So nice to see you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's continue with our chats and see what we've got going on here. There's so much happening in the news at the moment. And aside from Ukraine and Ketanji Brown Jackson and her existence, I mean, it's so unfortunate, isn't it, that she basically is it's so unfortunate that she's kind of stuck in the middle of this grilling. It's exhausting, it's just exhausting. All right, let's take a look at a couple more newspapers. Which one's this? This is the Enterprise Ledger, serving wiregrass since 1898. Weevil Women Sweep is the headline. The Enterprise State Community College Weevil Women took advantage of an early spring, windy Monday afternoon to sweep a doubleheader from the visiting Andrew College Fighting Tigers. 3-1, 8-0. Well, I'm pleased that they're happy. As long as they're happy. Spring plant sale scheduled at Gardens. I mean, this is very specific now. And Coffee County 4-H public speaker winners. And a bunch of kids who have all done a public speaking competition. That's so great. Do you think that's great? I think it's great. Okay, let's jump on some more. Let's see what we have. I'm really enjoying these tunes today. They're kind of upbeat. We normally have it a bit more chill, but I'm kind of enjoying it. I feel it's like having a little kind of kick up the jacksie. So appreciate that. Thank you very much. All right, let's see what else we have here. Excuse me. My system's running a bit slow today. That's why I'm kind of, Where shall we head now? Where shall we head? I've actually got a map of all the newspapers. Why don't we go to the middle America? Why don't we jump into kind of, I don't know, Kansas or somewhere? See what's happening on the old newspaper front. I'm just going to pick a newspaper out of the middle randomly and see what we get, The Times Record News. Here we go. They lead with Kurt apologises for bungled handling of WFISD staff plan cuts. I think I've actually already done the Times record news. That was like a random selection from the middle of the country. I probably did exactly the same thing as Sarah did when choosing this. The Sentinel record this morning, local dispensaries in top 5 for statewide sales. And also Lake Hamilton to host Arkansas High School Fishing Championship. What is it with, like, men and fish? Never really understood that. Drink and Think Museum Park Partners brew up science-themed series for big kids, which is always good. I was actually talking about taking my children to the Natural History Museum the other day and the Science Museum because they're together here in Los Angeles. And the Science Center has actually got a space shuttle in it, like a real space shuttle, and it's free. I think it might be the Enterprise, which was the first space shuttle, the one they used as a kind of test plane, the one they flew on top of a Boeing 747. Do you remember? They flew it up high. Instead of like dropping it, instead of like launching it on rockets, they flew it on the back of a jumbo, and then they let it go. And then it glided back to Earth. Because the space shuttle doesn't have an engine. You're aware of that? No engine. It's the rockets that it's attached to when it goes up. They take it into orbit, and then it just floats around in orbit, and then it has enough of an engine to push it out of orbit. That's all it needs. And then the rest of its journey back to Andrews Air Force Base or wherever is a glide. Unpowered, completely just gliding it like a very heavy glider. And it's flown by computer, because it's the precision required to get it on its trajectory so that it can land safely. And then the way it slows down is it comes down like that. You probably see this on a YouTube video. It goes down like that, and then the nose-up attitude is what slows it down. So it basically falls out of the sky like this, because it doesn't have very big wings, just big enough to keep it flying. Otherwise, it would do this. So the wings basically keep it level. And then it basically flies, and it lands like this. And then they don't put the wheels down till the very last minute. Literally like a few seconds before touchdown, the little wheels come out. And then the thing that slows it down, because Andrews Air Force has the longest runway, so it literally goes for several miles because it's going so fast. And that's why the parachute comes out the back, because it's the parachute as well as the brakes that slow the plane down. They have little air brakes that split out on the tail. It's kind of cute. So if you're interested, because to me it's like fascinating to know that a spaceship can basically fall out of the sky and land on a solitary runway. It's like, how does that work? How do they do that? I love it. I just think it's brilliant. Stacey said that is interesting. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. Trevor's joined us as well from Florida. Welcome. Cindy's here. Dashing Otter, Scientific Flamingo, some of the greatest names in today's show. Appreciate you. And parolee caught driving a stolen car, had guns and drugs, the police said. This is a chap, Jody Lynn Lewis, 43-year-old. He was taken into custody at Dodge Store, Grand Avenue, shortly after 1 a.m. and charged with felony counts of simultaneous possession of drugs and a firearm. This is the Sentinel record, for Arkansas. Stay away, is my advice. So, here we go. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? I just feel like we are surrounded by people with guns, and that makes me very nervous because, I come from a country where even the police don't have guns. And when I tell Americans that British police don't have guns, they're like, well, what do they do? Well, they police. That's what they do. They actually are trained, and they have skills. Communication skills, negotiation skills, de-escalation skills. These are the things that police are supposed to be good at. Anybody can fire a gun. It's 9:56. Sarah, at 10 o'clock, well, 1 o'clock for you, we like to play the US News Update. It's the daily podcast that I put out, which I think you downloaded. It's like a little 2-minute video, and so we'll play that in 4 minutes if you can make it work. If you can't, don't worry about it. But if you can, it's kind of useful. It's a nice little thing, All right, let's jump into some of the bigger subjects that we've got to talk about. Climate change is one of the biggest, as we've been talking a little bit about wind farms. Well, every year, public companies in the US are required to provide investors and regulators with detailed data about their financial performance and the risks that they face. Well, soon they may have to disclose information on how they are dealing with climate change. Yes, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission on Monday formally proposed new rules that would, for the first time, require businesses to report their greenhouse gas emissions, along with details of how climate change is affecting their businesses. Though some companies, such as Apple, have voluntarily reported climate-related information, until now there have not been any standardized requirements imposed by the SEC. Which is just ridiculous to me. It's like it just makes no sense that we are this far into the climate crisis, and still they're not setting standards nationally for companies to report their climate impact. I mean, isn't that the first thing you would do, seeing as most climate emissions are born of the corporate sector? Sometimes it's just... In a statement for support of the proposed rules, SEC Chair Gary Gensler said the regulator is responding to demand from investors and companies given the increased push for information on the risks climate change-related events pose to businesses. Our core bargain from the 1930s is that investors get to decide which risks to take as long as public companies provide their fair disclosure and are truthful in these disclosures. That principle applies equally to our environmental-related disclosures. Well, if the rules are approved by the regulators, companies will be required to provide climate-related information when they register as public companies with the SEC and also in annual filings. Companies would need to disclose potential risks to their operations from climate-related events, such as having operations in an area facing the risk of rising sea levels. The rules would also require companies to provide data on their own greenhouse gas emissions and also on how much energy they consume. These are known as Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, respectively. I mean, let's not forget that Donald Trump doesn't believe in any of this stuff, and he wound back all of the protections from the EPA that, managed the level of pollutants in water and exhausts and chimneys of factories. It wound it all back. It doesn't believe in it. Thinks climate change is just natural and happens all the time. And he doesn't even understand about what it does, how it affects the planet. He just thinks that, it's clean air and clean water. He doesn't understand about global warming as a concept because he doesn't have an intellect, so he can't intellectualize it. It's all about pictures and colours and big, bright visuals to him. That's the tragedy. And the tragedy is he could return. Terrifying thought. Okay, let's play the US News Update. It's a 2-minute daily podcast that I make for the Volley Network. You can download it wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll play it now. You can have a little listen just to update you on some stuff happening across the United States of America. Anyway, here it is. It's Tuesday, March 22. From the Volley Network, this is your daily US News Update. I'm Anthony Davis. If confirmed as its first black woman, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson would add not only racial and gender diversity to the U.S. Supreme Court, but would also bring a varied legal background, including a stint representing low-income criminal defendants. 51-year-old Jackson served early in her career as a Supreme Court clerk for Justice Stephen Breyer, whose retirement announced in January created a vacancy on the nation's top judicial body that President Joe Biden picked her to fill. Biden last year appointed Jackson to an influential Washington-based appellate court after she served 8 years as a federal district judge. Jackson's 4-day Senate Judiciary Committee confirmation hearing started yesterday. A simple majority vote is needed in the Senate to confirm Jackson to the lifetime post. She has won 3 prior Senate confirmation votes for other jobs. Biden has sought to bring more women and minorities and those with a broader range of backgrounds to the federal judiciary. He pledged during the 2020 campaign to name a black woman to the Supreme Court, which has had only 2 black justices, both men. Jackson would become the 6th woman ever to serve on the Supreme Court, joining current members Amy Coney Barrett, Eleanor Kagan and Sonia Sotomayor, the retired Sandra Day O'Connor, and the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Your daily US news update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo device to open Backchannel. And there it is, the US News Update. Get it wherever you get your podcasts. It's just after 10 here on the West Coast, just after 1 o'clock Eastern. This is Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. This is The Anthony Davis Show. You can write to us at backchannel.tv. You can message us with your voice. If you have an Echo show, just wake it up, say, and then your message. And also, we're on YouTube if you follow the show there. And, you can... just comment in the comments section if you choose to. Scientific Flamingo is in. Dashing Otter. Trevor has appeared for the first time from Florida. Cindy's here too from South Carolina. We've got Ryan and Verse Dark and me and Carl and Murrow and Crystal Bentley, Devout Fox and Gary, Rooted Condor, Ari and Stacy, who's got Tracy with her as well. So hello and welcome to everybody. I'm Anthony. I'm in Los Angeles. Sarah's producing. She's in Brooklyn today. I think Travis is watching on YouTube as well. So hi to him. Everybody's in. I mean, it's like a whole family sat around a kind of Christmas turkey, or Thanksgiving turkey. Got to get in with the right culture. We've been discussing climate change and looking at the SEC wanting companies to disclose how climate change is affecting them. Currently, the only company that actually does it is Apple, that effectively publishes its climate impact voluntarily. And does it not amaze you that it's like more companies are just not inclined to do so and that there isn't a legal requirement? I mean, how can America tackle any kind of emissions when it's the second most polluting country in the world, apart from China, if it's not asking companies to publish their climate impact data? I just don't get it. It's almost like it's one rule for the people and another rule for the businesses. Why is business held in such high regard? Where I'm from, people hate business. They think it's unnecessary. They think it's evil. It's not about that. It's about the workers. The workers here, they kind of take second place. I've had to learn this. Okay, let's take a little look at some of our other interesting things. The headline is it's an article from Rolling Stone, actually. Ohio Republicans would rather impeach a judge than stop cheating at elections. Yes, it says Republicans want to toss out a state Supreme Court justice for the high crime of demanding fair election maps. Well, shortly after the Ohio Supreme Court ruled for the third time that the GOP-approved legislative maps unconstitutionally favored Republicans over Democrats, Republicans in the State House are considering impeaching the court's Chief Justice. I mean, just think about this for a minute. This is the kind of stuff you might hear about happening in Russia. And as Sarah was saying earlier, it's like Republicans shout about freedom and yet they're trying to silence a judge. There is nothing free and fair about this type of behavior. Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor cast the deciding vote earlier this week in a 4-3 ruling that found the maps violated redistricting rules voters approved in 2015. The evidence shows that the individuals who controlled the map drawing process exercised that control with the overriding intent to maintain as much of an advantage as possible for members of their political party, the majority's opinion read. Well, O'Connor, a Republican, also sided with the court's liberal wing earlier this year in tossing out Republican-backed congressional maps after deciding that districts were gerrymandered on the GOP's advantage. I mean, let's just talk about this for a second, because this is very interesting to me. This is basically Republicans cheating because they know that they don't stand much of a chance of winning the election because they don't have any policies that would help their electorates, because all of the policies of the GOP help business, or they help GOP lawmakers, but they don't help people. And so The only way they're going to get votes is if they cheat, and the cheating is done via gerrymandering or the redrawing of boundaries. And so, if they've genuinely cheated, which they have, and if it goes to court and a Republican judge says you've cheated, that is a fair judgment. Now, to me, it's crazy that judges are political anyway, because in England, you can't have political judges and you can't have a political Supreme Court. Politics should exist outside of the judiciary, not inside the judiciary. The fact that it's done here is just beggars belief and does not favor the people. Nothing favors the people. Despite the Constitution, we the people, the Constitution is it was written at a time before, it was designed basically to protect rich white landowners from black farm workers. That's basically what the Constitution did. And so obviously it is amended, but not enough to protect the people, tragically. And so what I'm getting to is that just because a judge who is a Republican judge, she's not siding with liberals. That's not what she's doing. She's making a fair ruling against some illegal cheating. She's not siding with liberals. And that's the fundamental problem here in America, is that if a Republican judge rules against Republicans, they say, oh, you're siding with liberals. And they're not. They're siding with the truth. Because you cheated. And that's really what we need to reconstruct in our minds as being the difference between right and wrong, not just the difference between left and right. So rather than take the court's advice and retain an independent map drawer to draft a plan through transparent process, some Republican legislators are discussing invoking their power now to impeach the judge who will step down at the end of the year due to the court's age limits. Well, according to an email from a Republican State Central Committee member that was obtained by the Dispatch, an unnamed lawmaker intends to file an impeachment charge against the judge. I don't know if it moves or not, this person said. Judging by conversations I'm aware of, there is growing support for this move. The fact that you would impeach a judge for making a sound decision because the decision doesn't go your way, it's very similar to Trump throwing his toys out of the stroller because he didn't win the election, and he presumes that if he didn't win, that means that it must be fraud. And of course, it's not fraud, but he doesn't know that because he doesn't realize that he's seriously unpopular. And that 2/3 of the country think he is a fascist dictator. And because he goes to rallies where loads of people show up, he thinks that is qualitative to how popular he is. Do you remember when he was interviewed? He was like, how could I have lost? You see how many people come to my rallies? Think about that level of, that lack of intellect. To go, there's a whole load of people here. That means I must be the winner. Because Joe Biden doesn't get anyone at his rallies like they come to my rallies. It's an illness. The guy is mentally ill, and yet he is treated like he is not mentally ill, and therefore people take what he says seriously. And the guy is a very unwell person, a malignant narcissist. He's already been diagnosed by dozens of mental health professionals. And yet the media and his base and his followers, they still think that what he has to say is gospel. And it's not. It's insanity. According to an email from a Republican State Committee member that was obtained by the Dispatch, they said, I think it was Representative Stock Wiggum, who made clear where he stands. It's time to impeach Maureen O'Connor now, he wrote on Twitter. But Governor Mike DeWine, a Republican who serves on the GOP-controlled Ohio Redistricting Commission, said he opposes such a move. He says, no matter what we think of that redistricting opinion, this is an extraordinary measure to take, DeWine said. I don't think we want to go down that pathway because we disagree with a decision by a court, because we disagree with a decision by an individual judge or justice. It's not a good idea. So why does DeWine actually have some morals and some sense of right from wrong, and his colleagues do not? An impeachment would require the support of at least 50 of the state's 99 representatives. 64 of them are Republicans. A vote to convict would require 2/3 of the vote in the Senate. Republicans in that body have 25 of 33 seats, so they could definitely do it. But an impeachment of O'Connor would not only signal to Ohioans that Republicans will happily thumb their nose at fair elections, it would also inspire members of the GOP to follow suit in other states, such as North Carolina, where the state's highest court also struck down GOP-friendly maps. Why did they strike them down? Because they were cheating. And they struck them down because fairness ultimately has to be the deciding factor. Is it fair? And why have we normalized cheating? And why have we normalized the concept of, thinking it's okay to impeach a judge? Is it because the Democrats impeached Donald Trump and they said Donald Trump didn't do anything wrong when in hindsight clearly he did? He was impeached twice. Once for trying to extort Volodymyr Zelensky, trying to withhold aid to try and get him to investigate Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. That's extortion, so he was impeached. And the second time for inciting an insurrection against the United States and trying to overturn the election. I mean, come on. The guy is a criminal. But the problem is, people are blindly supporting him and believing him in a way that's having its knock-on effect through the rest of the system, the political system, and the judiciary. And getting to a point where you're like, well, if the judge doesn't rule in favor of us, we'll just impeach the judge because we can. That's not society. That is chaos. Who wants to live like that? And this is why a lot of the commentators are saying that the GOP is finished as a party, that it really has no structure and it has no morals. It certainly has no policy. Jeff's dropped in. Hello, Jeff from Hawaii. Noble Octopus is here as well. Om is with us. Hello, Om. Oh, Noble Octopus is in Florida. Welcome. Stacey has to go. Bye, Stacey. Thank you for joining us. Say hi to Tracy for us. Judy's dropped in for the first time as well from California. Wandering Rattlesnake says no. I'm not sure what that's in the connection with. And Noah is here. Hi, Noah. Thank you for spending your morning with Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. You've got me for another kind of 40 minutes, and then you can see Hal Rudnick, your pal. Hal, say it again. Hal, he'll be here. Not shallow Hal, but your pal Hal. Got all this to look forward to. This is Backchannel in a nutshell, you know? Wandering Rattlesnake says, turn this guy off. Be my guest. Your choice. We also need to look at the pandemic strategy, which is an interesting subject. Let me get it up on my screen for you. Yes, this is questions that are being asked as to whether or not the two Americas can unite behind a singular pandemic strategy. In Mississippi and Massachusetts, two pharmacists working in very different parts of America have seen a sharp drop in demand for COVID-19 vaccines in recent months. Their best guesses for why they've seen such slowdowns diverge considerably. Sad Dino, co-owner and pharmacist at 4 drugstores in the suburbs of Boston, wagers that most people in his community are up to date on their vaccinations. As he speaks from Acton Pharmacy in the Massachusetts town of the same name, his bet is a fairly safe one. 95% of the people in this county have at least one shot, according to the CDC. However, the Boston suburbs, where Dino practices, are awash in blue Democratic voters, with few surrounding areas voting for Joe Biden in the 2020 election by margins smaller than 50%. Meanwhile, precincts in Oxford split closely between Trump and Biden, but voters in many surrounding districts broke for Trump by a margin of 74% or more. Well, with US health authorities braced for another COVID-19 potential wave, likely to be fueled by the subvariant of Omicron known as BA2, the country is still deeply divided over its approach to its pandemic future, even as restrictions have been relaxed across all states. Since scientists recorded the first case of the SARS-CoV-2 virus in the US just over 2 years ago, politicization has been a hallmark of the American pandemic experience. Despite being worlds apart, the pharmacists both said that they had to convince customers to take vaccines. But Lomenick said he encountered far more widespread resistance. Neither Dino nor Lomanic wanted to talk politics, but their dividing lines are clear. In Acton and Oxford, they mirror national trends. Republicans are far behind Democrat counterparts in vaccine uptake. As of January, 63% of Republicans have had at least one shot, compared to 91% of Democrats. They say if you look at patterns of under-vaccination, you can see how they track with political environment. Now, as we know, a lot of this has happened because Trump said that the pandemic was the Democrats' new hoax and tried to politicize it from the very beginning. Aside from telling you to drink bleach and use a light to shine from the inside to somehow kill it, the division has often been pitched as one of science against politics, masks against liberty, and mandates against freedom. But deeply held political beliefs are only part of the story. The split is fed by American polarized news media. Republicans tend to trust Fox, amongst other news outlets, and become more alienated from mainstream sources between 2014 and 2020, according to a Pew Research study. That meant that right and left-leaning Americans have often received widely different messages about COVID-19. In turn, Fox News' opinion-heavy coverage has left its audience with more misconceptions about COVID. A separate poll by KFF found people who cite Fox as their most trusted pandemic news source are 3 times more likely than an NPR listener to hold misconceptions about COVID-19. So, let's think about this for a second, because it's very interesting to me. In fact, Sarah, you're very welcome to pop in if you want to talk about this, because I find this is one of my favorite subjects. And I have experience of this because my landlord here in California is a Trump-supporting racist. And I have to deal with him and converse with him and talk to him about this all the time because, it's nice to make conversation with people, and I hope that I can educate him a little bit. Now, he's had COVID and he refuses to get vaccinated because he thinks that it's a bioweapon invented by Dr. Fauci to reprogram people to vote Democrat. Which is not true, incidentally. It's not true. But that's his feeling, that's his thought. And he only thinks that because he watches Fox News all the time. I hate to call it Fox News, I should just call it Fox. He watches Fox all the time, Fox Opinion. And so what I'm left with is, a risk, because obviously I have kids and only one of them is vaccinated because they're not old enough. And so I have to be careful not to get too close to this guy. But I also recognize that his view is very narrow-minded. He's saying, I'm not going to get vaccinated because it's not been tested. And he's basically been told that it's been weaponized. Now, I've had 3 vaccines, and I'm hoping to get a 4th booster from Moderna. Everybody I know has been vaccinated, and apart from a sore arm and maybe feeling a bit yucky for half a day, no one's had any side effects. And also 10 billion doses have been given of these mRNA vaccines, which my landlord's refusing to take. But he's like, it's not been tested. Yet he doesn't want to take the Johnson & Johnson one either, which is a traditional vaccine, where some live virus is used and you make antibodies. You won't take that one either. So basically, and yet he'll get vaccinated for other things. So what I'm saying is that all of the rhetoric, and also there's also parts of the black community who understandably don't want to take it because, they don't want to be stuck with a needle by a white person. And that's invariably the case, and is fair enough, considering that black people have been experimented on by white people historically in medicine over decades, for various vaccines and drug trials and things. So, there's a lot at stake here for different communities, but Republicans never needed to get sick. They never needed to die. And that's why a lot of people are saying that Trump and Fox and all of the Republican movements that are anti-vax, the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the QAnon people and all of this, they all have blood on their hands because they have created this climate of fear. Now, if you go to other countries that aren't divided, and I'd use England as an example because I'm from there and I know how it works, we do not have this division in politics that is as extreme as America. I mean, it's got worse since Boris Johnson came in because obviously he's a terrible person. But I mean, it's very narrow, left and right. It's very narrow because England is it's just a normal country. It's just normal. You don't ban abortion. You don't have firearms. You don't make lesbian, gay, or transgender people feel like a minority. You just don't, because it's normal. You have wind turbines, and you try and reduce your coal usage, and you try and switch to renewables, and you're going to ban gas cars by 2035, and all of these initiatives. 15 years before America, incidentally, banning gas cars, and I don't think it'll ever happen here, but anyway. My point is that in England, you don't have people saying, I'm not going to get vaccinated because it's dangerous. I mean, a few people, obviously. There's always people on the fringe who kind of read and go to the wrong places for their information. Because if you go searching for a doctor online that thinks that the vaccine is bad, you will find one. Because there's millions of doctors, and they're not all the same. So you will find one. You are far less likely to find a doctor that is anti-vax in the UK. You'll definitely find them in America, but not so much in the UK. Sarah, are you there? Do you want to chat about this or not? You don't have to, but I mean, I just thought it might be interesting to talk about because, everybody has a view. Everybody has a view. And I'm of the opinion that we're living in a world now that lost its mind. How do you feel about this, Sarah? Do you think that like doctors who claim that vaccines are bad, or certainly COVID vaccines are bad, should be like struck off the medical register as some have been?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, why before the vaccines were out, I mean, that's all me and my friends could talk about. We just couldn't wait to get vaccines. Yeah. I could, like, my dad had cancer like 8-9 years ago, and he went through a stem cell transplant, and he's immunocompromised. And my brother is severely autistic. He has Fragile X, and his heart is really bad, and he's immunocompromised. So to even be around them, I had to be vaccinated. Like, to hug my parents, I had to be, you know what I mean? Like that. And to attend my college, I had to get certain vaccines. Like, it's just to be a medical professional, to be a doctor, and to say those things like, oh, you shouldn't get vaccinated, or oh, it's just, you should not be a doctor then. You should not, like, you're literally supposed to be at the forefront of science. And yeah, it's very dangerous. I think that a lot of people have died because of those comments and because of that. And yeah, I'm like you. I got all Moderna, all 3, and like, I'll do what it takes so I can be around the people I love. And again, this is what I was saying before about like my responsibilities. Like, it's our responsibility to do this. So
yeah. Why do some Americans not understand the concept of collective responsibility? Because, I mean, I had this conversation with a dad at a play date I took my kids to, and he was about to get a new car, and he was a lawyer, and he had plenty of money, and I said, what are you going to get? And the list of cars he'd shortlisted were all like gas guzzlers. And I was like, well, are you crazy? I said, like, now we know what we know about emissions. Why would you get a gas car? You can afford anything. You could get a Tesla or something fancy. And he said to me, what difference does it make if I get a gas car? I'm just one person.
Yeah,
and this is from a lawyer. Like, the logic, or the lack of logic for somebody who has no concept of a collective responsibility for saving the planet.
Oh, absolutely.
How is he not struck off as a lawyer?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, little things like that, and just to give someone that advice or whatever about like not getting vaccine, and like, some people, they just don't really like think. And what's really dangerous is that Trump was, for a long time being like, COVID isn't real, we don't need to get vaccinated, like all of this stuff. And his die-hard followers believed this. They really, really did, with all, and But I do know for a fact that a lot of Trump supporters have gotten vaccinated, like secretly or something.
Yeah.
And like Trump himself has been vaccinated and boosted
Yeah.
and all this stuff. And,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, I worry. I worry about the people who aren't vaccinated and then are around elderly people. Like, and I wish, what I really would love people to understand, what I wish doctors would say is that some people can't get vaccinated. Some people, like John Oliver was explaining this on his show about vaccines, saying that like some people with disorders can't get vaccinated till a certain age, or some people, their immune systems or their bodies just can't handle it. So they're relying on us to get vaccinated. And, you know, when I hear it's just mind-boggling to me. It really is, especially after being locked up for almost 2 years and knowing that if I get this shot, I can do stuff. Like, I know I work remotely, but a lot of people, like, couldn't go back to work until they did that. You know, it's just a very...
I couldn't wait to get vaccinated. In fact, I got tipped off that there was a Rite Aid out in the valley that was having no-shows.
Oh, yeah.
And so I drove like out to the darkest depths of the valley at 7 o'clock in the morning to be there for the 7:30 opening with my brother to get on the list of, spares at the end of the day. I didn't want to take a vaccine away from somebody that deserved one because this was before I was entitled to get it. I wasn't in the age group. I was so desperate. So I put my name on the list and then went back at 5 o'clock and waited until 7 o'clock to see if I could, get vaccinated. And we did. We were 1 and 2 on the list, but we had to sweet talk the security guard. We had to go through this whole like thing of guaranteeing that we could get one. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, this is the American healthcare system. We're basically having to go in guerrilla style at like 6:30 in the morning to kind of camp out to try and get a vaccine. And that was in March 2021. And then it was CVS. It was CVS. And then obviously you're entitled to get your second dose once you get the first dose.
Course,
so then that was easier. And then the booster I got as soon as they announced it, even before it was my age group, because I was just give me that booster. And now they're talking about doing another one. I'm like, I'm all for it. Because I've never got COVID,
Yeah.
Have you had it yet?
I don't think
a little
so.
bit.
I think that before, like, in maybe April 2020, maybe I had it. I felt like I had symptoms, but I also get intensely bad allergies, and those symptoms kind of match those of COVID. And when I thought I had it, there wasn't really accessible testing in New York like there is now. Like, literally tents everywhere for COVID testing, so I couldn't.
Yeah, I used to pay like $150 for a COVID test.
Which is crazy.
And I worked out, I've probably paid in total nearly $1,000 in COVID testing, none of which I can get back.
Wow.
Yeah.
One of my best friends lives in LA. She lives in the Hills. Is that what it's called? The Hollywood Hills?
Yeah, that's where I am.
Oh, yeah. And she was saying, before, like, to just drive around to try and find a test.
That's right.
And like to get a PCR test was like $250. I think, and that's a lot of money.
I know. I did it because I had to.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Have you always lived in Brooklyn?
I lived in Washington Heights for 6 years.
Washington Heights.
Yes. They actually filmed the movie in my neighborhood.
Did they?
I got to like see all the stuff. It was really cool. But then the pandemic happened, and I ended up in Brooklyn. It's just
Did you take the A train?
What?
You take the A train?
When I was living in Washington Heights, I did. Yeah. Took it all the time. Now I'm about the J train.
Ah, the J train.
Yes.
Well, that's very exciting. I loved In the Heights as a movie, but I saw it as a show in England years ago.
Oh, awesome.
I thought it was great. I actually really preferred it to West Side Story, which kind of came out at a similar time. The Spielberg movie. Did you see that yet?
I haven't, but everyone says it's amazing.
It is amazing, but it's a little depressing because,
of course.
Well, it's the Romeo and Juliet story, isn't it? So it's a tragedy.
Yeah. Have you ever been to New York?
Yes, many times. I love New York.
Yeah.
I used to cover the Tonys, so I used to go for the Tony Awards, which were named after me, so it's only fair that I should be there.
Of course. Well, I used to work in theater, so that was my Super Bowl.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, I was a stage manager for a real long time.
That's super exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I used to go to the dress rehearsal of the Tonys, which was on the Sunday morning at Radio City, and so I would go and sit with all of these celebrities. And I remember asking a woman sitting in front of me, her hair was kind of big, if she could move because I couldn't see, and she turned around and it was Carole King. It was quite funny.
Oh, that was a great show.
That was a great show, wasn't it?
It was so good. My dad reviews shows, so we go a lot. And yeah, it was so good. I think he's seeing The Music Man or something this week. But yeah, that's what I missed during the pandemic, just going to the theater.
Right. I went to the theater a few days ago to see Lehman Brothers, which is a national theater production, British production, that was on Broadway, and it's just come here on tour to LA for a month. And it stars a couple of British actors who I know vaguely. One of them directed me in a play when I was 10 years of age, which is kind of funny, and I haven't seen him since. And the other was a neighbour of mine in London, and I used to see him for cups of tea occasionally, and he was the star in it. His name is Simon Russell Beale, a very well-known British actor. And but it was a 3-hour, 20-minute show with 2 intervals. Now, what would you do in that situation, Sarah? It's a lot to deal with of an evening, and it started at 8 o'clock. I mean, I wouldn't mind if it started at 5 or something, but it started at 8 o'clock. I mean, take a guess of how I managed that. What do you think I did?
I don't know. I would have to drink a lot, maybe, or I can barely make it through 2 hours of a show.
I agree.
How did you do that?
I left after the first half.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I did. Because it's a 3-hander and it's a very simple set on a revolve, like an office building on a revolve, with some projections at the back, which my sister randomly did. My sister makes projections for shows, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I did Lehman Brothers." I was like, "Really?" Oh. She was devastated when I told her that I only lasted an hour. But I just don't think I think it's important that we have to be true to ourselves. Because I wasn't bored. The show was fantastic. One of the best things I've ever seen, actually.
Yeah.
But the idea of sitting there for 2 more hours.
Yeah.
When I was already starting to get a bit of a stiff neck.
Uh-huh.
And also there was a guy in front who kept farting. Out loud. Literally, you could hear him blowing off, and he didn't seem to care.
That's
non-stop.
Disgusting. That's disgusting.
Farting during the show.
Ew.
And I was just this is crazy. I'm enjoying the show, but do I want to sit here with a stiff neck, with a guy, passing gas? Or would I rather go home where I had a large cheesecake waiting for me?
Ooh, I'd take the cheesecake.
Oh, there's only one type of cheesecake, Sarah.
Yes, strawberry.
Neat. No, not strawberry. Neat.
Neat?
It's got to be
neat.
Yeah,
okay.
So I just really get the sense that we as a race need to learn when cheesecake should be eaten. It's very important.
Have you been to the Cheesecake Factory? That's where...
I have been many times to the Cheesecake Factory. Are you kidding me? There I also have it neat. What's the name of the cheesecake place in...
Junior's?
Junior's on Broadway. That's where you go after a show.
Yeah.
Right?
I was just there, yeah. It
has an orange kind of thing and orange tables. Yeah. Junior's.
It's great. Great for a cup of coffee and a slice of cheesecake.
Right? I often say to people, what is the best time of day to eat cheesecake? Could you answer that question?
breakfast and like maybe after dinner would be my two.
Interesting.
Yeah. Or like when you're drunk and you need a snack.
Yeah, I'd say midnight.
Ooh, yeah, that's good.
Right? Midnight.
Yeah.
Or any time of day, you know? But I made a full-size cheesecake, which is about 12 slices, so I'm just working my way through it, you know, piece by piece.
Ooh.
Which is difficult because I'm mostly vegan, so it's making me ill. Every time I eat it, it's making me ill. And yeah, it's just so delicious. I'm totally prepared to put up with the effects of the cheesecake.
Oh, yes, and vegan cheesecake isn't the
Disgusting.
same. It's disgusting. I'm trying to be vegan too, and it's just not the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are
All right,
some things you can cheat at, and cheesecake is one of them.
Oh, yeah. All right, well, I'll let them just
thank
have you for now.
I know it's not in your, it's above your pay grade to be doing this.
This is not, it's okay. It's okay.
It's not usual for me to be able to chat to somebody, so I'm really enjoying the opportunity.
Oh, good.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Very grateful.
I love talking about anything food related.
Oh yeah, the
always
cheesecake
be
conversation
here.
is ultimately, you know, the one of the greatest conversations you can have.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, you go be safe. Go finish your pancakes. That's Sarah. She's in Brooklyn. Elizabeth has joined us from Maine. Bella is here as well from Arizona. Efficient Leopard says hi. Hi, Efficient Leopard. Lauren, Michael, Bunny, and Lee, welcome. Great to see you here on Backchannel. We're going to talk a little bit about college admissions. This is with the last of the college admissions decisions for the high school class of 2022 arriving in the coming days. We're likely at the end of another record application year, according to the organisation that runs the Common App application volume through the middle of February. Increased nearly 10% from the preceding year, which itself was up 10% from the year before that. Well, over the past 2 decades, the number of applications submitted to colleges has increased more than 150%, even as the size of high school graduating classes has remained fairly stable. Well, this might sound like good news, but the growing volume of application hurts colleges and students alike. Flooded with applications and crunched for time, admissions officers quickly scan the files of most students who have no prayer of getting in and spend just minutes reviewing those that they ultimately accept, something that was witnessed last year when a journalist was embedded in 3 admissions offices. And while piles of applications and an ultra-low acceptance rate are certainly marks of popularity, these things are, in truth, indications of a poorly designed system in need of long overdue improvements. Well, much of the dysfunction stems from a misperception about how hard getting into college is. At hyper-competitive schools, ridiculously low acceptance rates have become the norm. 5% at Stanford, 10% at Colby College, 12% at Vanderbilt last year. But selectivity is something of an illusion, stressing students out and leading them to needlessly applying to multiple colleges when they can enroll in only one. The overwhelming majority of colleges admit that most students who apply, 75% of schools that use the Common App, accept more than half of their applicants. Yet students will come to the Common App thinking they aren't going to get anywhere, but they will, according to the president and CEO of the Common App, Jenny Rickard. In other words, plenty of spots are out there, just not at the small set of elite institutions whose freshman classes barely budged in size since the late 1970s. Well, they reckon that a better way exists. Colleges could alleviate the congestion and stress that they created and provide relief to both schools and students in the process, even at selective schools, by reforming the application system. But don't you feel it's the same for reforming any system of application or even voting? I believe that voting for elections should be done through a smart app, a smartphone app. I don't see why it wouldn't be as secure as online banking or anything else that has two-factor authentication or face recognition or something built into it. And it should be the same with applying for college. Now, the Atlantic says that colleges firstly need to be straightforward about their selection criteria. Although the average 4-year college in the US accepts nearly 60% of applicants, many schools indicate they are more selective than they are by telling prospective students that they practice holistic admissions, considering factors beyond grades and test scores. Well, this approach, which attempts to measure qualities that aren't quantifiable, and usually gleaned from an applicant's extracurricular activities and essays and recommendations, is loved and hated in equal measure by parents and students. Both favour a method that focuses on the whole student until they discover that applicants who had lower GPAs or test scores were affected. Holistic admissions may sound great, but many admissions officers at less selective colleges make the bulk of their decisions by assessing the rigour of an applicant's high school courses and grades. So maybe you've tried this. I mean, I never tried to get into college in any great way. In fact, I don't think I even bothered. I was just like, why bother? And there is this misnomer that unless you've gone to college, then you're not going to be a success, which is not true, of course. You could do a million other things. If you like to cook, then cook. If you like to sing, then sing. If you like to do anything that isn't a professional qualification, like a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant, then just do what is in your heart. There's no reason to be educated in an establishment that is just going to put you into decades of debt. And I would like to hear more from people who have been successful, reminding people that college is not necessary, and a college degree is not necessary, unless you want to go into these professions. Things that will require you to be, fully educated for their purposes. But, there's always a way around it, unless, of course, you want to go into something like medicine. Although saying that, there seems to be plenty of people practicing medicine in this country who are completely unqualified. And it still is a crazy concept to me that people go on Yelp to find a good physician. Does that make sense to you? You can message me in the usual way, backchannel.tv. Just go in there and send a message. You don't have to register. That's backchannel.tv. You can also wake up your Echo show, say, and then your message. And finally, we're on YouTube as well, and there's plenty of people following us on YouTube, and Travis is there as well, so hello to you. Thank you for popping in and checking in on us. As we've been discussing the college admissions scandal, of course, that was a huge thing, you may remember. Wasn't the actress from... What was that actress who got arrested for being involved in the college application scandal? You know the one. I'm not very good with popular culture. I don't really know who anybody is, but I know that she was an actress who was in that show with the girl from Superman. That's kind of the extent of my knowledge of popular culture. Terry Hatcher. She didn't go to prison. It was the other one that was in the show. I don't know how I remember the name Terry Hatcher. I don't think I've ever said that out loud in my life. Anyway, long story short. And then finally in today's show, I thought we would discuss an inspirational American, because this is something that we do every day. We were celebrating Black History Month, and now it's, Inspirational Women's Month. I think it's called that. I might have just made that up. But, who would you suggest would be one of the great inspirational females that you would like to celebrate? I think one of the biggest and brightest that people always kind of default to in America is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The first Jewish woman and the second woman to serve on the Supreme Court after Sandra Day O'Connor. She wrote notable majority opinions, including United States versus Virginia, Olmsted versus LC, Friends of the Earth versus Laidlaw Environmental Services. I mean, these are great kind of landmark cases that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was responsible for. Tragically, she was replaced at the wrong time by the wrong guy. Amy Coney Barrett replaced her. Do you remember? Somebody who'd never been in court, never tried a case, versus somebody who'd made a lifetime's, made a vocation and a career out of this. Well, she was born Joan Ruth Bader on March 15, 1993. It's not 1993. 19-something-3 in Brooklyn, New York. It definitely wasn't 1993. I don't quite know why it says that. 1903 might be more like it. It's probably 1923, isn't it? Or 1933. Anyway, she's the second daughter of Celia and Nathan Bader, who lived in Flatbush, Her mother, Celia, took an active role in her daughter's education, often taking her to the library. Celia had been a good student in her youth, graduating from high school at the age of 15. She attended Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, and was a member of Alpha Epsilon. While at Cornell, she met Martin D. Ginsburg at the age of 17. It's so cute when people kind of have a childhood sweetheart, isn't it? Don't you think it's the cutest thing in the world? She graduated from Cornell with a Bachelor of Arts degree in government on June 23, 1954. She married Ginsburg a month after her graduation from Cornell, and she and Martin moved from Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where he was stationed as a Reserve Officers Training Corps officer in the U.S. Army Reserve after his call up to active service in the war. And at the age of 21, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, this is who we're discussing right now, just so you know, at the age of 21, she worked for the Social Security Administration office in Oklahoma, where she was demoted after becoming pregnant with her first child. That's nice, isn't it? What a lovely way to welcome a child into the world, being demoted at work. That was in 1955. And in the fall of 1956, she enrolled at Harvard, where she was one of only 9 women in a class of around 500 men. In 1956, Ginsburg traveled to Columbia and became the first woman to be on 2 major law reviews, the Harvard Law Review and Columbia Law Review. In 1959, she earned a law degree at Columbia and tied for first in her class, and at the start of her legal career, Ginsburg encountered difficulty in finding employment in 1960. As Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter rejected Ginsburg for a clerkship because of her gender. What a lovely world we live in, you know? What a lovely country, that even in 1960, she would be rejected. Her first position as a professor was at Rutgers Law School in 1963. She was paid less than her male colleagues because she was told, "Your husband has a very good job." At the time Ginsburg entered academia, she was one of fewer than 20 female law professors in the United States. She was a professor of law at Rutgers from 63 to 72, teaching mainly civil procedure and receiving tenure in 1969. In 1970, she co-founded the Women's Rights Law Reporter, the first law journal in the U.S. to focus exclusively on women's rights. She then taught from 72 to 1980 at the Columbia Law School, where she became the first tenured woman and co-authored the first law school casebook on sex discrimination. She also spent a year as a fellow of the Center for Advanced Study in the Ruth Bader Ginsburg Behavioral Sciences at Stanford University from 77 to 78. She co-founded the Women's Rights Project, the American Civil Liberties Union, and in 73 became the project's general counsel. I mean, is it any wonder that so many women looked up to her and that she was held in such high regard in women's rights and trying to bring some level of equality into the workplace? She spent much of her career as an advocate for gender equality and women's rights, winning many arguments before the Supreme Court. And then in 1980, it was Jimmy Carter that appointed her to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit, where she served until her appointment to the Supreme Court in 1993. And between her retirement in 2006 and her appointment of Sonia Sotomayor in 2009, she was the only female justice on the Supreme Court. Ginsburg's dissenting opinion was credited with inspiring Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, which was signed into law by Barack Obama in 2009, making it easier for employees to win pay discrimination claims. She received attention in American popular culture for her passionate dissents in numerous cases, widely seen as reflecting pragmatically liberal views of the law. She was dubbed the notorious RBG, and she later embraced the moniker, which is kind of cute, isn't it? I really had to learn a lot about her when I first moved here because she was still alive when I first moved to America, and I didn't, it's not really taught in England, who the Supreme Court justices are in America, so you really have to do your own research. And it was just very interesting to me learning about how much of a role model this person was, what a complete superstar she was, and why so many women kind of rallied behind her and were so grief-stricken when she died. And then it was like a double whammy having her replaced by somebody who had zero experience and who didn't advocate for any of these things. In fact, he was like anti-abortion. And, that's the tragedy, really, of allowing a lunatic to lead you. Somebody who doesn't have any morals or scruples, who cares nothing for the progression of society, cares nothing for women, cares nothing for workers' rights, cares nothing for the environment, cares nothing for the arts, cares nothing for society as a whole. And yet weirdly manages to mobilize, 74 million people to vote for him. To me, that's like the greatest question that is left, because he was a great operator, a very smooth marketeer, a very convincing and capable liar. And consequently, so many people were like, yeah. And also it doesn't help that America is steeped in racism, so you end up with a country that is kind of almost desperate for license to be racist, and that was only that group of people. Not everybody, but just that group of people who were so drawn to this guy who was so overtly and openly racist and aggressive towards women and calling people dumb and stupid and yet there was nobody more dumb and more stupid. So how do we qualify, changing because I'm very into solutions and I'm very into, I don't like to moan about stuff. I'd rather kind of focus on the solutions and the answers. So how do we rebuild what has been deconstructed? How do we restore the thinking and the advances that made America so forward-thinking? Or was there always this percentage of dissenters who just didn't really love America? Because you can't claim to be a patriot and be anti-immigration. You can't claim to be a patriot and be pro-abortion. Because they don't fit in with the ideals of America as being the free world, freedom and liberty. So if you are truly free, then you should have the right to choose what you do with your body. So, Sarah mentioned this earlier, it's these contradictions that really do make America so dysfunctional and hypocritical. And it's all of our jobs, me as an immigrant, you, depending on where you're from, about having some perspective. And it's easier for me because I've come from a socialist country with a conservative government. So I see America through a different lens. And so I recognize that, to get 0 weeks maternity paid leave is not normal, when in some parts of Europe it is literally 49 weeks. 49 weeks of paid maternity leave in Europe versus 0 in America. And so that's the perspective that I come to this country with, of how different it can be and what normal is. 2 weeks vacation a year is not enough. It should be 4 or 5 weeks, which is statutory in Europe. To get a paid bank holiday shouldn't be an exception. Should be normal. And in where I'm from, all of the bank holidays are paid and you take them off. And there's like a dozen of them. And then, in addition, there's sick days, taking time off because you're genuinely ill, not earning sick days and accruing sick days. That is a fallacy. In England and most of Europe, if you are sick, you go sick and you get paid. Unlimited number of days. Because you are sick. Genuinely. Anyway, I just think it's interesting bringing some perspective of living elsewhere, and that's why maybe it's a good idea to live abroad, to move, to relocate. Your Pal Hal is next. I'm Anthony Davis. I'll be back tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock Pacific. Join me then. Have a great Wednesday. Bye for now.